I know I can do this, but that can do.
If he's sick, he might be just coming to the union.
Yes, oh.
Yeah.
I know I can do this, but that can do.
If he's sick, he might be just coming.
Yes.
That's also cool.
We'll call the Tuesday, April 1st, 2025 regular council meeting to order at 9:02 a.m. I'd like to welcome council to the meeting this morning, including Deputy Reeve Ruarwa, who's attending online. If you can just acknowledge that you can hear us, Deputy Reeve.
Yes, I can. Good morning.
Morning. Welcome to administration and the chicken delegation and to anyone who's also attending online this morning. Okay, we'll move on to item number 2 on the agenda, or the adoption of the agenda. I'll start this morning. There is one item I want to move. It's item 7.9, significant revenue policy. I'd like to move that to item 8.1 under committee of the whole. That's more of a briefing note rather than looking for a decision today, so we can put 7.9 under 8.1. And I'd also like to add as, I guess, 7.9 now. Spur Resources Road Use Agreement. And under 7.10, gravel hauling costs. Might be addition, Councillor Hunter.
No, nothing for me. Great.
Councillor Wood, what would you do with it? Councillor Wittis,
Yeah, I got a driveway on 530 and 834.
711.
Second.
Could you repeat the order, please?
530 and 834.
In the south. Yeah, right on the boundary.
That one has to be dealt with pretty soon since time sensitive there. Fire on Range Road 200. That would probably go on the committee of the whole meeting, maybe.
That's the hope.
Yeah.
8.2.
Fire Range Road 200. 8.2. And then fire 560.
712.
Yeah.
Anything else?
So that's it.
Administration, I believe there is a piece of correspondence.
Yes, Mr. Reed, there is a correspondence from the province with regard to fire service grant.
That'll be 11.9. Anything else? Okay. All right, thank you, council.
Yeah,
Dan,
I have one dust control on 163 south of Highway 16.
What number is that?
So that'd be 713.
Anything else, Deputy Reeve? Yeah, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay,
Have to keep on
Over.
pressing these buttons.
all right. Anything else for that?
No, that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Council Administration. I will now entertain a motion to accept the agenda as amended.
I will do Lamont County Council adopt the April 1st, 2025 regular council meeting agenda as amended.
Any questions or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? I need a yes from Deputy Reeve or no. Dan?
Yes,
Hello?
yes, I,
Okay, thank you. Move on to item 3.1, adoption of the March 11th, 2025 regular council minutes. Council's had the opportunity to review the minutes. Any errors or omissions noted?
Because the Constitution does not allow you to forbid the free transit.
Seeing no hands going up, I will entertain a motion to adopt the regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Lamont County Council adopt the March 11, 2025 regular council meeting minutes.
Thank you, Councilor Waiters. Questions or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor?
I,
Carried 5-0. Okay, item number 4, public hearings, none are scheduled for today, so we'll move on to item number 5, delegations. And the first delegation we have with us is ACOM and the village of Chipman. You ladies would take the chair.
All the cross branch is not me, but it's checking the chamber government has a building with the administration.
Probably about 15 minutes to make your presentation, and then we'll have a
Oh, fantastic.
5 minutes question and answer.
Sounds great.
And I know you've been here before, April, so you should know all of council here, and I should know all of council here, so
Yes.
we'll save time and dispense with the introductions here.
Fantastic, thank you so much. So good morning, thank you so much for having us this morning to speak about an update on Bridge File 1127. So the purpose of today's presentation is to give just everybody an update on the overall project. And then we have a request at the end of the presentation here. So we'll just start out with a quick overview of the background on how we got here with the overall project. Okay, so the first slide is, sorry, sharing it to see if it zooms, perfect. So the introduction, we're going to go through the Bridge 1127 background, which is located just to the north of Chicken. Go over the project history and sort of how we got here over the last few years and our plan forward, and then entertain questions if there's any from the councilors. Okay, so the first, I think everybody's probably familiar with Bridge 1127, but this is located north of the village of Chipman. So this was constructed back in 1963. The ownership was transferred from Lamont County to the village of Chipman in 2010 through an annexation agreement. And the current condition of the bridge is that it's at the end of its life, it needs to be replaced. So there's currently, if we can go to the next slide, please, it's currently reduced to a single lane of traffic. As a result of just a quick review of the conditions. There was an emergency assessment that was done back in August of 2022. The piers on the outside lanes of the bridge are in poor condition, as you can see here. And then if we can go over to the next slide as well, please. This is a photo of the underside of the girders. So standing underneath the bridge, this is an example of the concrete. So we can see that there's some spalling, exposed rebar on the underside of the bridge. Perfect. Next slide, please. So the current situation is that the traffic has been reduced to a single lane. So we have, there's barriers that the village of Chipman has put up in place to keep traffic off of those exterior girders. So we have a single lane going each way on the bridge. And then next slide, please. So the project history and the path forwards will provide a quick overview and then happy to answer questions. So in August of 2022, there was an emergency bridge inspection that was done by AECOM's Calgary office. So this had arisen because the County of Lamont grader operators had some concerns on the girders on that bridge. That concern was raised to the County of Lamont, which was then forwarded off to the village of Chipman. Pat Tonko had engaged AECOM to complete that emergency bridge inspection and sort out a path forward. So what we had decided to do is we completed a conceptual design for replacement of the bridge in kind, and a funding application was submitted to Alberta Transportation in November of 2022. That funding allocation was approved. Moving forward, we had done the geotechnical investigation in August of 2023, and that unfortunately found bedrock at a higher elevation than we had expected. And what that meant is the cost estimate for the conceptual and preliminary design for the less expensive steel-driven H-piles was no longer feasible. So we had to move to a more expensive concrete abutment design for the bridge. Following that, we requested additional funding from Alberta Transportation to cover that additional cost. That funding was denied in November of 2023. So the design had migrated then to a culvert replacement similar to the Charleston's Corner on Highway 29. So that's where we switched from the replacement in kind for the same span to the culvert. And that design was started in September 2023, and the preliminary design was finalized December 2024. Current situation is we are putting the project up to tender on April 14th of 2024. So that's in 2 weeks here. And the forecasted completion date for replacement of the bridge with the culvert will be October 15th of 2025. Well, that's a lot of information. So maybe we can jump to the next slide and then we can come back to this for questions. So the request or the update from council is firstly just the village of Chipman is requesting permission to post the tender package on Lamont County's Alberta Purchasing Connect account. So this will be happening in the next 2 weeks. So the village isn't set up with an APC account. So it'd be the package that's being prepared by AECOM would be posted on the County of Mont's Alberta Purchasing Connection website, just so that the contractors can bid on it and then we can move forward through construction. And then the second part of this request is mostly just to update the County of Lamont on the status of the bridge, but also just reaffirm the funding collaboration that we had discussed for the single span replacement about a year or so ago. So maybe we can go back to the previous slide and then we can happy to answer any questions. Also on the line, we do have Amy from our Calgary office, who's the project manager and lead structural engineer for the project. If you have specific technical items, she's happy to answer this.
Hey, you see somebody on the line?
Yes, Amy is online, I believe. Amy, I'm not sure if you're able
Hello,
to...
everybody. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Amy De Laurentiis in the Calgary office.
How we got here, she would be the person to answer it. She's also the person that had dropped everything and come to do the emergency inspection back in August. So she's very familiar with bridge and the clear condition.
Okay, so let me start off by saying that there is a coffee talks in Chipman, there is a coffee talks in St. Michael a couple of weeks ago, and one of the first questions that was asked is, when is the bridge going to get fixed? And I think the general assumption of it's a bridge, and we did inform our ratepayers that that's not the case, and we appreciate the update today because we weren't quite sure where the status was. There was rumors kicking around that it had progressed from a typical bridge to a bridge culvert style. Maybe I'll let Councillor Wick start in here if any questions.
Yeah, no, the only question majority of people asked was what's it gonna end up costing kind of at the end? And now you give us a projection date of October, at least it'll be finished, right? So that was kind of their two major concerns, and they just kind of wanted to know what the cost of this thing is gonna. It went from 1.3 million, I think, it's over 3.
Yes, that was the revised single span replacement in concrete abutments was over that value, which is why we had to go back to the drawing board. So I guess what we prepared for the village previously was sort of a one-page project summary. So we can update that with the new timelines and information, and then we can have that available for for your next session if you wanted to print up copies, if there's any residents that have questions. And it's on the costing side, so AECom is currently finalizing the issue for tender cost estimate. So that'll be shared with the village here in the next week or so. And then the plan would be the village is going to send a note over to the county of Lamont just with the updated totals and the request for that additional funding amount for the unfunded amount from Alberta Transportation. And so we can have some further discussions at that point. But because and then it'll be posted for public tender April 14th, and then the contractor will provide the real price, and that'll be.
So what is the original cost? Do you recall?
Yeah, I think it was 1.8, Amy. I don't know if you're able to chime in on this, but I believe the original STIP application to Alberta Transportation was for 1.8 million.
Correct. Yeah, that would, well, no, the original cost of the bridge was estimated at 1.8 million, with the STIP application covering, I believe, 1.3 of that.
Yes.
Did your old STIP application carry forward, or do you have to do a new STIP application for the bridge culvert?
No.
Is
Um,
still available?
Yeah, that's a critical piece here, right?
That's correct, but with each application for additional funding, you have a 6-month timeline before you know whether or not you're going to be approved. So when we applied for the second round of funding, it took 6 months actually before we realized that the funding would be denied. So then that forced us to change the design and look for alternatives. And the culvert option is probably close to the original cost, but we don't have the final numbers yet. AECom is working them out, and once we have them, we're prepared to share with Lamont County.
And Alberta Transportation has been involved in our regular update calls, so they get copies of the preliminary design report, so they're still very much aware of the status. So
You don't see any problem with the STIP application being continued here?
No.
Do you know, a couple of the other questions were, is width still going to be the same and load capacity still going to be the same? Or are we going?
Fabulous question for Amy.
sorry, I couldn't hear the question very well. Something about load capacity.
Yes, with the revised culvert design, is the width going to remain the same, and is the load capacity going to remain the same as the original?
Yeah, so the road will be the same width, and then the load capacity, Alberta, we designed for a CL 800 truck. That's typical design loading, so that will be what it's designed to.
You can't give us an estimate, because then, because everybody's got to bid it. If you give an estimate, then it gives them, they might go cheaper than what you're thinking, right?
Yes. So there will be something we'll prepare to send to the county, and then you can decide whether or not it's distributed.
Yeah, the diameter of the culvert?
3.67 meters, and it will be 40.7 meters long.
How many meters, sorry? High?
Yeah, it's the diameter is 3.67 meters, and the length of the culvert so far, as we know, 40.7 meters.
Steel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah, Amy, it's corrugated.
It is a multi-plate culvert. So yeah, it's corrugated.
It fills my heart.
Is that a flat bottom or is that round?
Amy, is the bottom flat or round? I can't remember.
The bottom is round. Yeah, it's just a circular corrugated steel pipe. It will be a multi-plate pipe, so it will come in a bunch of pieces essentially that will be bolted together.
He was so excited.
Okay, so at one point we heard there was some issues with, that being a fish corridor and a fish not swimming through a culvert. Have you
Yes, it
resolved that
is.
with
Yeah.
Alberta? Or
That
that would be Fisheries Canada?
Yes,
We have
that's right.
followed all of the rules and accounted for all of the fish things and filed all of the approvals, so.
Yep,
I
so
guess
all,
Amy,
all of the environmental permits have been applied for, and we've gotten the permitting to go forward with the construction of a culvert. And then in terms of fish passage, there's certain requirements written into the contract that the contractor will have to meet, which is typical of Alberta practice.
Construction starts, do we have an alternate route plan that they're talking about? So that people, I mean, we can
Yes,
advertise it,
I brought copies of it. I'm prepared to circulate it.
just so we can
Yeah, so you can see.
advertise and
Yeah, right.
let people know which way to go for a while.
There goes with the administration pass.
Yeah, no problem, yeah.
Maybe send it once we have the letter, but next week we can attach that as
Yeah.
one of the pieces to send it.
Yeah, but, and there's, because you're working in water, there's a restricted activity period. Between April 16th, June 30th, you're not allowed to do any construction work. And then the other condition that was put on us is we have to put netting under the bridge to prevent birds from nesting. And that has to be done before April 15th. And I understand that, the guys are working on it, today.
Okay, so I had a discussion with Mr. Boyko yesterday. Apparently, when this thing was first presented to council and your STIP grant was approved, we had approved to finance the 25% equity that was required here. And the main reason for that is because our county traffic utilizes that road. It's kind of like a connector road, I guess, between, so you can see Highway 45 and Highway 15. Now, I think that money was in place, Rodney, for the 2023 year.
That's correct.
But I don't think we carried it forward to 2024.
Yeah, that's correct. So we did not carry it forward to 24 because it was unknown at that point, and in 25, we did not carry it forward. So that would have to be in addition to the budget if we do fund that.
And we didn't budget for 2025 because we didn't know what was happening here. So what we're gonna need, I guess, to reconsider this is we are gonna need the costs so that council can make a decision based on what the new costs for the bridge are gonna be. And kind of go from there, right? But that original money that we had set aside is no longer there.
Okay.
But we have to look at the proposal as a new expenditure and like you say, it wasn't budgeted in our budget, so we'd have to find the money to come somewhere in order to offset that. Just so you know where we're standing on that particular item there.
Mr. Reed, given some of the decisions council will be making in the next 2 meetings, does council want to go into a brief closed session and have an understanding of what the estimates are?
We don't have the estimate finalized. Our projection is to have it finalized for April 8th. So if it's possible. Or ballpark, that's fine.
We should have the
If we-
estimate very shortly. Yeah, I've been in talks with Alberta Transportation for typical pricing of these items. So it should be within the STIP budget application. But of course, we don't know it until we get contractors to bid on this, especially with the volatility happening with trade. So
Fall within
The only issue. You wanna put this out for tender fairly soon, right?
Yeah, April 14th is the target.
We have council meetings April 15th. So, do you think the problems in posting the tender are?
No, it's engineering tool, that's not an issue.
Okay. Okay, any other questions? Safe to assume that the cost estimate would be roughly what it was previously.
Yes, I think we are aiming for that. That it was intended redesigns to be within that original, that budget we talked about previously.
That steel locally sourced or is it?
It's a bit of a ballpark. Amy, I don't know if you know if the manufacturer for the CSP is from.
Yep, the supplier should be local, so we shouldn't have issues, but again, the market is volatile right now, so it's hard to know, but I had received a quote from a local supplier. Yeah, so it should be okay. I can get an update on that as well.
Okay, I think that would be a good idea just to have. Great.
Perfect. Just a clarification on the size here. I'm old school. 3.67 meters would be
11.9 feet, 12 foot.
12 foot. Okay. And 40.7 meters.
135, more or less.
Yeah, and a road allowance there would be width of a road there. You know that.
The width of the road, Amy, is 10 meters, 30 feet.
The roadway, so the roadway width is going to be 10.7 meters clear roadway. Sorry, I don't know what that is in feet. I can convert it.
Okay, so that culvert's gonna be extended at each end quite a bit then beyond the road, right?
Yes.
They have to buy concrete.
Are you operating within the bed and shore, or do you have to buy private property there?
Amy, can you confirm we're in the villages right away? We're not on private property?
Correct.
And the width road, the road of the width of the road is 35 feet.
So then that would almost indicate the road is gonna have to be widened a little bit.
Yeah, I think it is being widened from the current bridge, just slightly. I think by about a meter or so.
All right, that's technical questions for the engineers. Anything else? Any other questions for council? No. Anything else you want to present here?
Nothing further for me.
No, nothing, but I think everyone's aware because we're going with the culvert option, it'll be a guardrail less design. So that will be eliminated, and it's just that there will be some road work that has to be done to accommodate that style of culvert.
Does the road have to be raised?
About 6 inches, I think.
Yes.
Yep, it's being raised.
Yeah, are you sure you're not gonna need guardrails on this thing?
Well, we've been told not with the design.
No,
I can say-
Yeah.
Yeah,
As that, if there's the guardrails on the revised bridge design?
sorry, guardrails for the roadway. Though we won't need guardrail just based on the side slope of a 4:1. That meets
Okay.
the design standards.
All right. No other questions? Okay, appreciate the update. And we will await what your cost estimates are gonna be. And probably accept your presentation, today's information, and direct administration to bring it back to the next council meeting here. Okay.
Much appreciated. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
It's up to the contractor, which we.
So can we?
Here, 8:30. And then.
Recommend a motion today to accept this information. Can we put on there and direct administration to bring funding proposal back to council? Because we're gonna have to find this money, if we do these types, we'll have to draw the rate.
If we had money set aside, where did the money go? We used it up, right?
Just put it back into reserves, right, or
I thought we had it set aside.
we did for 1 year.
That's always. You don't want guardrails for guys. Yeah. Which is good. There's no, for 3 miles on either side, right? So it's gonna be, if we have our ways. Famous with
You wanna put that motion on the table so we can move this?
Sure. I'll make a motion that Lamont County Council accept the presentation from ACOM, April Classic, and Village of Chipman, Pat Tomko, regarding the bridge 1127 project. Update his information and direct administration to bring the bridge 1127 project proposal back to the next council meeting.
Any questions or concerns? Through the debate. Seeing none, all those in favor? Deputy Reeve? Dan?
Aye. Aye, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Stay
Okay,
mute.
well-
Unmute. Yes, I will be. I am. Yes, did you hear me? Sorry.
We got. Okay, 5.2, Canada Rural Academy, update on enrollment and approval process. Okay, roughly 15 minutes to make your presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions from the council.
All right,
And
thank you
all
for,
council here, you've been here before, so dispense with the introductions and stuff here.
for sure. Thank you for the opportunity to address council with updated information since our last visit back on January 14th. Unfortunately, Kylie was not able to join us today due to competing priorities. We are pleased to report considerable progress since that date, January 14th, and we'll dive into those details now. I trust we will fully address any and all questions, outstanding questions or concerns. So a little recap on project status. As we reported in January, our charter application was submitted after months of collaboration with the Ministry of Education, with peer schools, both STEM focused and other types of charter schools, with parents and community members. And through that work, we recognize that we actually had the opportunity to provide a little bit of a special sauce aspect as the only rural focused STEM program which brings with it some unique appeal to both our potential parents, students, but also to the local communities and the provincial government. Parent curiosity and potential interest has caused us to take communications and marketing actions as if our approval had already been made and was a certainty. And I think that was in fact, the type of language we used with you when we presented last, that this was not an if, this was a matter of when. This also included a February 28th open house event, which exceeded all expectations, seeing over 200 people come through the doors. I believe Councillor Anaka, you were present and saw the size of the crowd and the enthusiasm for our facility. And at that time, we also produced a second pamphlet, which we distributed here this morning, as ongoing communication and marketing is necessary with this project. If we move to the next slide. So this is the picture of our enrollment as of March 4th. The approval of the charter happened on March 5th. So we stopped taking parent declarations on the 4th, which is just basically a soft expression, because now it's time to start converting soft expressions into actual enrollments. So as of March 4th, that's what we looked like, with a total of 87 K-12 declarations. A number of additional inquiries had been made, but the actual submission of the declarations had not happened. And we, since that time, are working on enrollments. I have not done the count of actual conversions, because it's happening every day in terms of hard copies walking into the school to be dropped off, or electronically. So that kind of flux we can't keep up to just yet. But by the end of this week, we will do a refresh count. What we know is that we are seeing parents submitting enrollments that were not part of the initial declarations. So we know we will be in fact past the 87 number. In fact, it's looking like we will open the school in the 100 to 105 student range at this point. Part of the reason for that is when you look at the high school numbers, we're a little bit weak. We had intended in the application for 10 per grade 10s, 11 and 12. And I've had a conversation and got agreement from the ministry that it makes sense to hold out, go beyond our target of 85 while we try to secure some additional high school students. And so that's our focus. And that's what will take us into the higher 100, 105 enrollment range. Move on to the next slide, please. So if you build it, they will come. And those numbers, as we've talked to parents, looked at the declarations, looked at the enrollment forms. This is what it's looking like. We know at this point that Lamont will have to be a pickup point for us. Surprisingly, we thought that we had only a few from Bruderheim, that they would come to Lamont to be picked up. It's in fact looking more like there's sufficient momentum in the Bruderheim, Fort Saskatchewan, Josephburg area that would cause us to consider Bruderheim as a pickup point for busing. There will be a pickup point encompassing Hilliard and Chipman families. We have families coming from Vegreville, as I said, Fort Saskatchewan, Josephburg. We know Two Hills will be a pickup point. There's sufficient mass there. And there's some changes that have been happening with Aston View in terms of their busing alignment, and that has caused a number of Vilna, Bellis families to shake loose and enroll with us. So we need to find a pickup point somewhere around Chandru Bridge. And then, of course, the general Andrew area. So busing is something that we're actually gonna tackle next week, an initial cut at, looking at actual addresses, physical addresses, determining where, in fact, we need to be planning our busing from. Next slide. So in terms of the approval status, it is in fact a provisional approval. And so on this point, I want to make something abundantly clear. So to our knowledge, every charter school application has been granted in provisional terms. Now, I haven't spoken to every one of the 43 charter schools, but I did contact 14 on this very question. We also posed the question on March 14th at the Alberta Association of Public Charter Schools Association meeting, and about half of the schools attended. All of them confirmed starting with provisional status. This is the norm for how the province grants the approvals. And our foundation has or is in the midst of addressing every one of the items that has been listed in provisionally. We saw nothing that was new or surprising to us in the provisions. We had anticipated it, and we are well down that path. I am now working with the field services manager who's been assigned to us by the ministry for this very purpose, as well as the capital finance people. So June 2nd is the date highlighted as the deadline for almost all of the items, and we will have no problem delivering well before June 2nd. Next slide, please. So within that conversation with the field services manager, we have a task list that's been verified. As I say, we're working on the reconciliation, and we don't anticipate having any difficulty getting there. Next slide, please. So back to our original purpose for approaching council. As you recall, we asked on January 14th for a starter fund of $50K. Now, as you've probably heard from the newspaper coverage, that sort of thing, public conversations, even over the 10 short weeks since our last visit, significant progress has been made in our work, and somewhat on a bit of a shoestring budget. And what you're looking at in this slide is what's in front of our foundation in the very immediate terms. Some items we have been, I would say, slow walking a little bit due to financial constraints, limitations. And we're kind of at a point where we really do need to move forward. So as an example, with the number of enrollments coming forward both in hard copy and electronically, we are looking at bringing a school secretary, a temporary or part-time school secretary on board immediately. Posting is out. We'll be interviewing this week because these documents carry a privacy legislation requirement. So they need to be looked after, maintained, and taken care of within those provisions. We have a need to outfit the administrator offices with furniture. I was in fact in Edmonton yesterday and sourcing some furniture. But we have to be careful about pulling the trigger on a purchase because of financial constraints. I have a 2-week window where I have premium pricing available to us, but we'll lose that opportunity after 2 weeks. So I don't want to go through every one of the items, but you can see that we're in operations now. We're no longer an application. It's go time, and some of these activities carry costs. Next slide, please. So as I said, our original ask remains. I hope that we've answered all of the questions that were previously on the minds of council members here. And yeah, the next 3 months, if we thought we were busy getting here to this point, the next 3 months are even busier. As an example, when I leave here, I'm heading back to the office because we're interviewing for our superintendent. It's that kind of activity that's in front of us. Any questions?
Yeah. So any questions? Did you see a shift in any past students that are going elsewhere that would be interested in changing their minds?
Changing their minds, which way?
Go to the Andrew Charter School. That have been going either Smoky Lake, Lamont, Bagerville. Any change in that?
Well, as I said earlier, I mean, we knew that we're drawn from all those communities. You know, even in terms of getting to the 87 in the soft expressions of interest, those are converting now into enrollments. We know that a number of the enrollments that we have received are from families over and above that 87 previous declarations. So we know we're well past 87. We just don't know how far past 87.
We are seeing a significant interest. So during our soft open house, we had 200 persons come in. And I did speak directly. I was in the classroom dealing with the drones presentation. A lot of interest in the diversification of our curriculum and making it more hands-on. And that is, I think, brought a lot more attention. I did speak with one mother who had her son and their neighbor's child with them to come up and look at it. They're a grade 7. They found this was much more the idea of the charter school, being able to directly be involved with industry and advancing in different sets like the drone technology and how staff moves off to. That's swaying a lot of people's interest as it's become more practical for children. So I think we're seeing that sway in people wanting to come here for some.
Yeah, we've built some aspects into our programming that just simply are not available in the regular public system to the degree that we're offering it. First, the level of adaptation of the core curriculum into practical hands-on experiences. The relationships we've built with the post-secondaries, and right now, we've been working through our governance because there's a priority. We have 4 memorandums of understanding waiting to be signed and several others queued up shortly to be put in place. We have a fairly significant path outlined with the University of Alberta that will integrate with our programming. We're calling it Pathways to Possibilities. These are opportunities that children outside of large urban centers typically have not had the advantages of accessing, and we're creating that deliberately for them. So yes, there will be strong appeal. We're going to have to cut the enrollment off at 100, 105. I expect that there will be expressions of interest or after that beyond 105. But given our application, we've got limitations in terms of funding for classroom furniture, for teachers. So this thing has a lot of momentum and a lot of interest. So it's exactly what the other charter schools told us was going to happen, is exactly how it's playing out.
When the province start forwarding funds to you?
There's a startup fund that is part of this, and this is what I'm now working with that field services manager to determine based on, coming up with the preliminary budget, what needs to fall first, so I've got to work that timeline out with him now that I've got contact made with him.
That level of funding may not be available for a period of time. So it's this gap in between us. As a village councillor, we've invested our village monies into this. And but there's that gap in between the two funding. And this is where we don't want to drop the ball.
So as a follow-up, Councillor Nag's question. Where does the funding come from? Doesn't come from the school acquisition, right? The charter school is funded separately, and is that funded by the province or the federal government? Or
a charter school is still a public school, just like the rest of the public system. The province budgets two separate pots, a regular public pot and the charter public pot, and our allocation is about 1.8, 1.9% of the overall public pot, yet we're graduating over 4% of the students in the province.
So the funding from the school rec that we all pay into with our property taxes, and that goes into that general pool, and then it's divided up out through our public school system, but also with the charter system. And the provincial government, we brought forward an increase of funding for charter schools by $12 million this year in our 2025-26 budget. So it's something that province is investing in. So the long-term funding for it is in place. And this goes back to Jason Kenney when they started establishing and expanding charter schools beyond the 15. So it's the startup cost that becomes the critical part for any of these charter schools, including ours, until you can access those funds and prove you've made it to this level. Again, as Dan has identified, there's certain things we were required to have. We have a preliminary. So it's kind of like getting your beginner's driver's license. Now we've proceeded, it's been approved. Now we're waiting to get our actual photo license in the mail. But there's that time period in between where you're just stuck with that one little piece of paper and the cop pulls you over. You got a lot of explaining to do. And we're in that situation right now where we just have to explain a little more and why we need this funding and why it's critical to this point. For success.
So did Elk Island gut the school in regards to desks, furniture, or are the desks and stuff still there?
No, they
left the minimum.
essentially break the place. They took almost all furniture. The 5 or 6 desks that were left behind were in some cases partial damage, not usable. We are going to dispose of all of that. There were some filing cabinets that were salvageable. There's some student desks, but they're of no use to us because
Maybe 20 desks.
the setup of the school, the way the curriculum will be designed, rows of desks are not how this is going to work. For anyone who did participate in the open house, you would have seen the showcase classroom, which is a more group collaborative kind of environment, and that's what the classrooms will look like. So really, from a furniture perspective, there was nothing to work with. AV equipment was, I don't understand what happened. Some rooms, they pulled the equipment completely. Other rooms, the equipment remains, but the lines are cut. So it's a choppy situation we have to recover, but it's planned for within the startup costs.
Because if I recall correctly, that school was set up with the wiring that you could basically do remote education through. I don't know if that's still the case or not. But anyway, going back to your capital campaign and formulation stage, that's just to attract donations or sponsorships, or what's the capital campaign involved there?
It will be both. So it's a very significant initiative that we are partially down the path. We are looking to partner with industry, with community members to the tune of $1.82 million. This work is, we've identified a campaign chair and a team that will support this individual. Part of the advantage we have is we're on the cusp of the Heartland industrial zone, as you know. The program, the STEM programming appeals highly to employers in that area. We've already had initial conversations with at least one player who is willing to step up. But to do this right, we need to take a step back and do this strategically, because they're not the only player. There's several others also knocking on the door, or at least interested in what we're doing. So we're going to be approaching this over the next 12, 18 months in a very, very strategic way. And not just to make it a one-hit wonder where, you know, we take a donation from an organization. We want to build long-term relationships that keep that school funded and viable going forward.
Any other questions for Stan or Mervin?
That school administrator furniture, what's the ballpark on that?
We will outfit the full school for probably 3K, which is a significant cost saving against new furniture.
3,000.
3K, yes.
Had a lot of support from interest from people and companies, and one's offering us a very good deal on furniture for a short period of time through the administration. We're also seeing a lot of interest. People want to know what they can do, and until we get ourselves the superintendent, the curriculum in place, yeah, we'd love to take in a whole new welding shop, but we don't have the spot for it. So we have to limit ourselves with some of this. But to your question there, no, we should be able to put the administrative furniture and costs around 3,000.
Right. And so when I use that, I'm talking about 3 office desks, the chairs to go with that, the secretary chairs and office filing area. So like I say, under 3K. That doesn't touch things like the classroom furniture, that sort of thing. That's a whole different matter.
Deputy Reeve? Dan? Can you unmute yourself?
Tap to speak. Okay. Yeah. Is 3K realistic for furnishing of 12 classrooms and the office? You know, you buy a table and chairs today, it's for your house, it's $1,000.
That was just, Dan, that was the administration, secretary, that no desks for the kids. No
Okay.
students, desks for that $3,000.
So just as clarification, who I'm working with is GD Liquidators that I've had a past working relationship with. They called me on Friday to let me know that they had received a shipment of furniture, some new, some used. So everything that we are picking up for the most part in terms of desks is used, but next to new. So superintendent office, I was able to outfit the desk at $400, the principal's desk at $675, and a third office at $450. New office chairs for the superintendent and principal at $130 each. The new secretary chair, ergonomic, because they work out of that for so much of their day, $325. Then office guest chairs for $25 a piece, next new. So that's based on the 2-week window that they're giving us the grace on. After that, that 3,000 is probably gonna look more like 5K. You pick up exactly the same pieces.
Filing cabinets, master filing cabinets have already been purchased and donated to the foundation. So here, just desks and chairs. Those filing cabinets requires the master filing cabinets. Were actually purchased at the Elk Island yard sale they had there. Put in the storage and donated back. So that helps alleviate thousands of dollars in costs right there on any of these personnel file cabinets. They're very expensive.
You okay with that, Deputy Reed? Hey, thank you for your presentation. It certainly answers a lot of questions I think that council had in regards to the school and the progress that's being made. Obviously, there's a very sincere and concerted effort to move this project forward here. I think council now has adequate information to make their decision on the funding request. However, we'll have to wait till we get a presentation back from council or administration at the next council meeting, and we should have a decision for you at that time. So, and the request is still for $50,000. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen.
And we remain available for any follow-up clarifications, questions,
And if
or find us.
if at any time you care to, if you want to stop in, I know you all have busy schedules, but if you know ahead of time, don't mind giving me a tour of where we're at, so you can actually see the facilities. Stan and I are pretty much available most days. So just give us a heads up and give you a private tour if you'd like. We're offering doing this with Stan's been doing this with parents also, because of their schedule. So it's a very active site at times. Thank you.
I've been to GD liquidators many.
Pardon me?
I've been to GD liquidators many.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, so there is a recommended motion presented. I think this one reads quite well. Yeah, I make a motion that Lamont County Council accept the presentation from Rural Academy, right, as information and direct administration to prepare a report for funding approval back to the April 15th, 2025 regular council meeting.
Any questions or concerns? Further debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Deputy Reeve? Hello, Dan.
Yes,
Thank you. It's carried 5-0. Council wanna take a 5 minute break or do we go on to 5:03? 5 minutes? You're okay with that, Stephen?
Yeah, let's get them on my side. No problem. Right on.
I've never. Yeah, because I know, yeah, because that's a beaver on side.
All right, we'll reconvene the meeting at 10:15 a.m. And we're gonna move on to item 5.3. Presentation from Matrix Group regarding our financial statements.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Just a friendly reminder, my name is Stephen Weber. I'm the audit manager here at Lamont County. I've had the pleasure of working with you guys for a number of years. So I got a good handle on how everything operates and strengths and weaknesses and everything that is of interest to this council. With that being said, I believe everybody's got a copy or had a chance to look at a copy. Whether you want to follow along or just listen to presentation, I will reference pages and things like that if you are interested in following along. The first thing I always like to go through is the independent auditor's report, and just a friendly reminder, that's just the very first inside the front cover. Now, this is the report that if you're not a numbers person, or if you don't look at these things every day like myself, at the very least, you want to look at these first two paragraphs. These are the opinion and the basis for opinion for the audit. Now, the opinion is where we as independent third-party auditors come in with no stake in the county, good or bad. And we make sure that you guys are in compliance with, in this case, the Canadian Public Sector Accounting Standards. Now, this is the set of standards and guidelines that all municipal governments in Alberta have to follow. This ensures that all of your revenue recognitions and control processes and your bylaws passed and your various payroll controls are all up to compliance with these specific standards. Now, I'm happy to report that once again, in our opinion, these financial statements present fairly in all material respects. Now, translate that to English that everything looks great. Information came across in a timely manner, organized. We had no issues getting to the bottom of any of our questions or concerns throughout the process. We do not expect these things to be perfect. That's not the nature of the audit. The audit is to get to perfect or get to compliance, which by the end of these and this document here, everything looks fantastic. So now, just for peace of mind, the basis for opinion is the set of standards that we must follow in order to get to this opinion. Now, this is not us just with our opinion that we've done enough, or what do we need to look at? We think this and that. We are also set to follow a set of standards and guidelines. This is the Canadian Generally Accepted Auditing Standards. This is going to be any audit undertaken in Canada, at least under the CPA program, is going to be following this set of standards, and it gives us our guidelines, our benchmarks, our rules that we must follow to ensure that we've done enough work. Now, the other paragraphs here of information, it's just outlining that you guys also have an annual report that does take some of the information from these statements, and it is responsibility of management to ensure that we have a quick glance at those and make sure the financial data used matches up with what we're reporting and council eventually approves. The other items are just everybody's roles throughout the process. I'm not going to go into those in too much detail. Both the management roles and the auditor's roles are extraordinarily general. Those are going to be the exact same in every single audited statement you look at, just outlining everybody's role, responsibilities, and duties throughout this engagement. Okay, now for the fun stuff. Page 3 is where I'm going to start. This is called the Statement of Financial Position. And a friendly reminder for those, again, that don't look at these all the time. This is not the summary of everything that happened throughout the year. This is our snapshot of how things finished and comparing that to this time last year. So with you guys being a fiscal December 31st year end, that's the date we're looking at. For the most part, we've had a lot of consistency and not a lot of surprises this year, which is a good thing. In the audit world, the boring is the best thing possible. So I'm just going to go through some of the bigger changes or some of the highlights, areas of interest. As you can see here, you have a strong cash balance. We did see an increase of roughly 2.2 million this year. The vast majority of that is easily explained between two categories. The first of which is the item right below it, accounts receivable. So as you can see here, we did see about a $1.3 million decrease in what was owed to the county. Now, a lot of this is timing, specifically with the provincial and federal grants. Last year, we did have significant MSI capital and your CCBF or the Community Build Fund grants outstanding, owing to you guys at the end of the year. Now, when it comes to provincial and federal grants, there's no collectability issues. It's just a matter of when you submit reports and actually receive the funds. So a big chunk of that decrease this year is due to the fact that a number of those grants that were outstanding did come in this year. Now, in addition, we always look at property taxes as well. You guys did have a very consistent balance year over year, and in our determination, the allowance was very suitable for anything that was unsure or maybe won't be fully collected, but that was properly allowed for. So we feel very confident in collectability on the number that you're seeing there, the 2.9 million. Land held for resale, again, a very small number, but we did sell one of those items this year, hence the drop. Again, we're not talking large dollars. One item was sold and it was, just under $10,000. The big one here on the asset side would be your offsite levy receivable. There was a new one this year. There was a second one entered into with AMRT. Should be no surprise to you guys. That will be, the reason it's broken out separately as well is it'll be quite a long standing per the agreement that everybody signed. So that'll be in installments over the next number of years. All the details are in the note if anybody's interested. So in that offsite levy receivable, we now have two large amounts, and this is directly linked to jumping down to liabilities, the increase in deferred revenue, which I'll get to in a moment. So moving down to the liability side, again, accounts payable and accrued liabilities. So this is just a number of trades payables. This is your policing accruals. This is any of the invoices that roll into the county in November, December, and don't get paid until January or February. Very, very common. Simply just a matter of timing and when the invoices come in and are paid. Very little fluctuation in that, not a whole lot of changes, and definitely nothing of concern. The vast majority of which has already been paid or cleared out by this time in real time. Our employee benefit obligation, again, very consistent year over year, not significant numbers, so I won't spend too much time on that. Deferred revenue, as mentioned. So this is our unspent grant fund. So anytime you receive your grant funding or your allocations and or the aforementioned offsite levies, anytime those are earned but not yet spent, they end up in this pool. Vast majority of that $2.3 million increase is directly related to that AMRT offsite levy mentioned above. So in this case, it'll be mostly receivable to be paid over the life of the agreement, and it'll sit in deferred until that is utilized for the designated purpose. In this case, typically utilities, roads, things like that. As well, we did see a small increase in deferred grants. Now, this is directly related to having, again, allocations divvied out to the county that are yet to be utilized. Strictly a timing basis. I have no concern at all that you guys will find a way to spend that money. Asset retirement obligations. This was our new guy last year. All the changes here is just going to be what they call accretion, or essentially inflation for simpler terms. It's just that value that we will have to clean up eventually. It's just getting 1 year a little bit more expensive is how that changes. And then our long-term debt, no surprises there. Just no new debt this year, just paying down the old stuff. Jumping to our non-financial assets, we have three main categories, of which should be no surprise to anyone in the room. The first of which is our inventory for consumption. The vast majority of this is gravel, as we all are aware of. Gravel did see an increase this year due to increased crushing, hauling, purchasing. As well, if anybody's expecting that to be slightly higher just due to timing, there was a big gravel purchase in early January. Obviously, that won't show up here. That'll show up in the January statement. But all in all, very easily tied into with surveys and hauling reports, everything we go through, all of that detail to make sure that gravel and other inventory is reflected properly. Prepaid expenses, again, most of that's just going to be smaller contracts, insurance that don't run on a December year-end timeline. So if they run on a different line, but you've already paid for them, we just need to reflect that in the proper year. Very minor, more of an accounting. Last but not least, everybody's favorite is tangible capital assets. So you will see a small decrease here this year. Vast majority of that is to do with, we had total purchases of, what do we have here? 2.9 million, offset by our amortization cost in the year of 3.5 million. Then we had some disposals. We roughly got rid of 1.3 million off our books for assets that were either traded in, sold, or written off. Of the big additions in the year, most of it was around equipment this year. Not a whole lot to do with roads and culverts. There was some, but not a ton. The big stuff were 2 graders totaling 1.3 million. A couple of heavy trucks, Peterbilt, and one other gravel truck, roughly 535,000, as well as a tractor this year for 226,000. Any questions, concerns on anything I've gone through there? I did go through a fairly high level, but as I mentioned right at the outset, it's not a very exciting year in a good way. Everything was fairly straightforward. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, if we go to our accounts receivable.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at page 43, which is note 3 here.
allowance for doubtful taxes. Is that primarily related to oil and gas?
That would almost all be related to oil and gas, because the idea is that anything residential, you'd be able to collect if you had to take the property. The oil and gas is all on the uncertainty around, especially right now, lots of the stuff is in court or things like that, or waiting to see if things are in receivership. So anybody that hasn't made payments in a number of years and is really starting to build up. We didn't allow for 100% of it, because that's probably unrealistic, but we did bump it to kind of get a better coverage of the older stuff.
Okay, so with the oil and gas, how long before we decide whether it has to be a write-off?
It's typically up to you guys and the information you have at hand. There's no right or wrong for that. You can leave it in allowance forever, or if you want to sit there and say, we don't think we're gonna get this, you have the ability to actually fully write it off and then try and apply for some of those refund credits I think the government gives.
And it would appear as though our doubtful for accounts receivable general went up. 284,000 seems like a lot of money. Is there one in particular there? I don't know if you know that, or Rodney know that.
That is why I bring the computer in. Absolutely fine. For allowance for doubtful on the trade, I can let you know that we booked that to match anything in the oldest bracket, so that'd be people outstanding of over 6 months typically. But I can tell you who that is.
Yeah, we are still in open session, but yeah, that is mostly one aggregate levy, as well as there's a couple of fire invoices that.
Okay, no, that's fine. That answers my questions. Good. Okay. Okay, and then if we go to our deferred revenue.
Yeah.
And really that appears as part of the notes.
Note 7.
7. It all looks good, except we're showing road bonds for a couple companies here, Apache and Encana. I'm not sure when we take road use agreements, where is that money reflected?
Road use agreements. So
We charge a bond for road use agreements, right?
Right.
Now, I'm not too sure, is that through letters of credit or is it
Yeah, it
paid in
depends,
cash?
depends on how the money comes. If the money came in cash, you're gonna see it here. If it's just a road bond, you're not gonna see it on. These are financial statements, we note those on the below the line. We normally show how much we have there.
And I know Canada is, well, no, it's not in Canada anymore, is it? So, yes. But is Apache still a viable entity?
That I don't know.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I think for now, it's pretty much.
Okay, and then we do have our accumulated surplus, and I'm gonna come back to that at the end. So jumping to the next page. Statement of operations, for those following along in the statements, that's gonna be page 4. Now, where the last page was the snapshot of how everything finished on the last day of the fiscal year, this here is the summary and the details of everything that happened throughout the year. So again, all very consistent. First thing I always like to look at before I go line by line is overall revenue budget to actual. This is what, for the most part, council has control on and bases all of their decisions on. And I can see here that our overall budget on 21.3 million was within $100,000. So that is fantastic. So you know that everything pretty well went according to plan. Looking at the very first item, the net municipal taxes. So this is unique in the sense that this year there was a court ruling that actually changed the commercial assessment, a fairly significant amount compared to typical. Like when we're talking budget to actual, we're talking 5%, but usually you guys were within 1%. So you will see, if you're wondering why that's down from budget and down from prior year, is you guys did lose out on some commercial assessment based on that ruling. Again, not the end of the world. We're talking a couple of percent variance here, which in the big picture is nothing, but is a little bit unique. So I thought I would touch on that. Investment income, As you can see here, council typically does budget fairly conservatively when it comes to rates of return and actual interest earned, but you can see you had a very well performing year. Significant cash in the bank, as mentioned, up 2 million from last year, plus rates held strong, resulting in 1.7 million in investment income. Sales and user charges. So this was a significant jump over last year and prior year. A good chunk of this was going to due to the fire and highway call out. So obviously you can't really plan for that one. That's going to be unique year over year. That was roughly $500,000, $550,000 greater than budget between the few categories. And again, very difficult to predict that one. You don't really know what the demand is going to be, how many call outs you're going to get. So that's more of a one-off item. Where we did see an increase that you may want to factor into future budgets is in water sales. Heartland was far exceeding both budget and prior year and how active and how much sales you guys did do on the waterfront. Now, we did expect some increase because rates did increase about 5% based on bylaw passing, but we did see close to an 11% increase based on the 5% of rates and another 6% in consumption and activity. So again, you guys would know better than I would if that was just a busy project or something that was kind of a one-off, or if that thing is just doing really, really well and everybody loves it, and you may want to budget a little bit higher moving forward. But that was the vast majority of the sales and user charges increase on that front. As well, there was a small bump in FCSS, which directly offsets the costs below. The home visit program that has some sales and things like that was very busy this year, both on the revenue and expense side. It does net to zero, so no concern on that front. But again, higher than budgeted. When it comes to government transfers for operating, so these are your grant fundings, various, whether it's MSI, formerly MSI, or the community builds funds, or the brand new local government funding framework that are used on capital purposes, whether that's your operating one or studies or repairs and maintenance. Any of that qualifies under those programs, but it's not considered capital itself. That shows up in here. In addition to things like your FCSS and your agriculture grants and your summer wages grants and all that good stuff. The reason we are down from prior year, a good chunk of that was to do with a budgeted disaster recovery grant from the province that did not come in this year. We do not expect it to never come in. It was just delayed. So there's a big difference there. Roughly 550,000 was budgeted for that grant. I think the funding will be coming in more just in 2025. And in our experience as auditors, lots of times, if it's a lock solid agreement, we will book an accounts receivable, even if it hasn't come in. But with you guys and across the province wide, those provincial disaster recovery grants are all over the map in how much they decide to give you and when it comes in. So it's just not worth booking and guessing and getting it wrong. So we just wait for it to actually come in to book it. Penalties and taxes, again. Consistent, budget is usually pretty conservative. We did have less than last year to do with the fact that either some of your old bigger ones that we were previously penalizing, like Point Bar, they did go on payment plans and maybe not as consistent as we'd like, but they are pitching in. And since even for your peace of mind, January, February, March that I've viewed up until this meeting, they've made a couple more payments. So they're not totally going away on you guys. And on a side note, you guys may get some calls from other municipalities. I don't know how you are getting payments from them, but nobody else is. I don't know why they like you guys, but they are absolutely ignoring everyone else and trickle payments to you guys. So at least you're getting something. License permits and fees, again, very consistent year over year. We did have some significant budgeting that didn't quite get realized, but that would maybe be a little bit more optimistic, as the numbers that I saw in actual last year and the last couple of years are always around that 100,000 mark, maybe a little bit above. And then we get to some really small stuff. The only other thing I'd like to mention is in the other category. Last year was the anomaly when we're seeing it go from 112,000 down to 49. Your 49, 50,000 or less is very common. Last year was the anomaly. You had the one-off item to do with the bungee that you guys did on their behalf and then collected. Again, I do not expect to see that again unless you guys come to another agreement, but that's more of a one-off item last year rather than why is this year so much lower. So then from the expense side of things, you can see here, as we'll get to in a moment, very much in line with the actual revenue taken in. The big fluctuation this year was going to be in public works, our big number right at the top. And to no surprise with this county, most of the fluctuation, both from last year and budget, is gravel. So we did budget for a significant increase in gravel usage, contracted services around gravel, salaries and wages around gravel. This includes patching and laying down different things for things like dust control, all of that stuff around road maintenance. So you guys budgeted significant increase over last year. It did increase over last year, but not nearly to the point where the budget was fully realized. So we're looking at, $2.6 million below budget. I think 2 million of that was in the gravel category. That will also be somewhat related to the increase in gravel inventory that we talked about on the last page. That goes into inventory until it's used, and then once it's used, it flows down to the expenses. So when inventory goes up, obviously our gravel expense recognized in the year is going to be less than we expected. So everything's totally in line with expectation and kind of in line with the full circle looking at it together. Moving down administration and legislative, again, very, very similar year over year, not a whole lot of fluctuation. This category is extremely consistent and predictable. So both within budget and last year within 5%, can't get much better than that. Fire protection. So despite all the additional call outs and revenue generated, the actual cost stayed very similar. If anything went down a little bit from last year. So that's wonderful. I think a big chunk of that would be around the disaster stuff last year that we were hoping to book the grant for this year. But again, very, very consistent, right in line with budgets. That's always wonderful. Agricultural services, this is another category similar to admin that you guys are very consistent year over year and with budget. Not a lot of surprises. You guys have that one very, very much figured out. Family and community services. So again, these programs and the spending are strictly based on funding and sales coming in. This program never operates in a deficit. So when you see it's up over last year in budget, that is directly mentioned to do with the increase in sales and user charges in the related program that I mentioned up above. When it comes to water supply and distribution, again, most of that decrease from budget, we're getting to smaller numbers here now, but was just due with repairs and maintenance and contracted call-outs, far less than we're budgeted, which is great. I think for the most part, that budget is based on worst case scenarios in case everything goes wrong and needs to be fixed, and not a lot did this year, so that's wonderful. Planning and development is the next big budget fluctuation. So we budgeted 1.2 million, actual cost 600,000. Again, very easily explained. Most of that is to do around the land use bylaw. We had planned to do some work between, where's my note here? Between the bylaw update and the professional services and the contracted services to do so. Budgeted for around 400,000. Actual cost in the year around 100,000. For the most part, I can see that is either going to be carried forward into 2025. Everything I looked at didn't quite wrap up. And if it did, or if it's close to, then you guys just came in under budget. That's excellent. Policing, very consistent year over year as we'd expect. And the rest of this stuff is, again, getting smaller and smaller as we go down and very, very close to budget. Not a whole lot of fluctuation as we go lower down. All in all, operating, so with 2.1 or 21.2 million in revenue, offset by 21.5 million in costs. Now, I always like to remind people at this point, and I'll get to it in a moment when I talk about the reserves, a big chunk of that is the amortization cost, which is a non-cash accounting adjustment. So as mentioned, amortization, when I was talking about capital this year, about 2.9 million. So of that 21.5 million in expenses this year, you have 2.9 million. That's essentially an accounting adjustment, not cash out the door. So when you pull that out, and hypothetically, you guys were in a surplus position as far as cash instead goes. Which again, to tie everything in a nice clean circle, or in the cash balance in the account went up roughly 2.2 million. Again, when you factor out amortization, very consistent with what we're expecting to see there.
Question here, Steve.
Absolutely.
So we're not really putting amortization anywhere on here.
Amortization is spread throughout the departments. So on fire trucks would be in fire, public works equipment would be in public works, and so on and so on.
So then if you add that 2.9 million or whatever it was, we're actually in a surplus of about 2.5 million.
You're in a cash operating surplus of about 2.5, exactly. And then that'll lead into our reserve conversation at the end. Looking at the other revenue and expenses, so these are one-off items. These are items that we typically don't budget for as much or are a little bit less predictable, but also are either non-cash items such as gain and loss, or our government transfers for capital. Government transfers to capital, so this would be our grants spent on TCA or actual assets this year. vast majority of which were spent on the heavy equipment previously mentioned. Used on the tractor, used on the Peterbilt, and used on the fire engine, fire engine costs, which were some of the big uses this year. There's some other smaller equipment in there as well. And then the gain loss, we did have a loss on disposal this year after trade-ins and everything of 420,000. I was gonna mention a bit of that. I don't know if we want to chat about that in the closed session. You have a preference?
Open's fine.
Okay, I was just gonna mention, when it comes to the gain and loss, vast majority of that is to do with our trade-ins on the graders. So the only thing I was gonna say to keep in mind, I know the county's been doing this strategy forever, and the reason you're starting to see numbers like this is because Rodney had the same question, and I thought I would walk through it with him, and he found it very useful, so I thought I'd walk through it with you guys. So since even went back as far as only 2022, graders are up, the cost of a grader is up 25% in that amount of time. So now by flipping them and trading them every couple of years like that, it's definitely not as beneficial. We're starting to run into to flip it and buy the new one, or to with the value you're getting on the trade-ins, because it's amortizing at the same rate as always. Doing that on 400,000 or doing that on 550,000 is starting to not be as useful as it used to be. So just maybe some food for thought, useful going forward. When you're flipping a $400,000 grader and buying a $550,000 one, and you're getting the trade-in value of say 80% or whatever it is of the old one, it's definitely not covering its costs anymore.
We're losing money on John Deere's bringing in a lot less when we sell them or trade them.
Yeah,
They're bringing us a lot less than the cats, and to buy them, they're within $4,000 of each other.
is that right?
Yeah.
With that in mind, though, Stephen, like we've gone to a 7-year rotation now,
Okay, perfect.
which should help, but are we straight lining these at 20%?
I believe so.
Tracy's nodding yes.
Should be in the,
And you're keeping 20% as a residual value, so that's what you're thinking will be left.
Right.
Left then.
they aren't getting anywhere near the residual though, because you're trading them in far before that, but.
I'm just thinking if we're using a 20% straight line, especially now with 7 years, they should be depreciated to less than what the resale value is.
Well, the 7-year trade-in value has nothing to do with amortization. We don't amortize based on when you find the trade in.
So I appreciate that.
So I can pull up some details here. I think the biggest thing is just the fact that they've gotten so expensive. They're not recovering as much.
So in essence, what's happening here is the book value is greater than what we're getting
Right, so
for the piece of equipment.
exactly. So when you used to buy your graders for $350 and flip them a few years down the road, all that was left on them was say $250, and you were definitely getting $250 for a grader. Whereas now, like the ones we disposed of, we're up to $450,000 a grader, and we've only had them for 2016, so they still have 250 grand left. They're getting 180 each. You know what I mean? So you're technically losing 70, 80 grand on a grader. And then it'd be different too. I think that when we used to do this, and you guys are not unique to this, all my counties did this. The big thing was, okay, well then you will flip you for the new one, less maintenance, all that stuff. They were roughly the same cost, but now when you flip it for the new one, it's $650. So I mean, you can pay for a lot of maintenance for 200 grand. So that's just, it's just not quite, I mean, that's just the nature of the world and the way it's going, is it's just not quite as efficient to, just flip to the new one, especially now with these tariffs going tomorrow. Like, I don't know how that's gonna impact everything, but it can be good. So just, that was more of a food for thought, like not the end of the world at all this year, but just one of those things that's worked forever, maybe we want to reconsider. Or at least, expand your timelines or something.
So could you go from a 20% straight line to a 30% straight line?
I don't think we could do it that fast. Because they still have to be a little bit realistic. If you wanted to keep it like a 30-year straight line, that's only assuming that it would last 10, 11 years. So I don't think we'd want to go that fast. And then, and that would just increase your amortization cost and decrease your bottom line.
Okay,
Yeah, especially if tariffs go up, that's an extra 25% on top of whatever. But you really for it now.
Yeah, yeah, well, I mean, let's even just say it's a lower one, 10 to 15 or something, or some negotiation. 10% on 650 grand, that's, you know, you're looking at $710,000 piece of equipment now. But. Okay, so then, with that in mind, anybody have any other questions or concerns about that page before I go check through some reserve stuff?
Yeah, let's go to page 45, gravel inventories.
Sure.
I think that's intentional on our part, maybe Darby or Rodney could verify, but I think we order more gravel each year so that we kind of fill up our reserves a little bit each year. So that
we could get to the point where, you know, maybe you got 1 year supply in the bank kind of a thing. Is that an accurate statement, Darby?
Yes, the supply contract council entered into for 24, 25, 26 does allow for an increase in gravel inventory. So buying more than we're planning to use in those 3 years.
And then for your peace of mind too, because I have the luxury of looking at, you know, a dozen counties. The rates you guys are getting on gravel right now is pretty good, to be honest. I look at all of that, all those invoices and all those rates and the crushing and everything, and you're getting very competitive rates from what I'm seeing other people get, so for peace of mind.
Yeah, the increase in gravel inventory, it's kind of a plan thing, I think, so.
Oh, yeah, no, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, for example, too, when I look at, I just pulled it up a reference, a 5-year historical for you guys, like, last year was the second lowest your gravel inventory has ever been. So it's not like all of a sudden it's like, well, why are we so high? It's more like last year you guys used a lot. Your rate, if I did an average of every year, you'd be right in line with average rate this year.
Because gravel is a very large part of like what our expenses are, by us putting that into inventory, it's almost like a reserve. That 1 point the 1.0 million is like we don't have to tax for that one because we already have that in reserve. So yes.
It's the county's version of stacking gold bars. Okay, so since we're already there, we'll flip one more page. I'd like to go through the accumulated surplus with everybody. So as you can see here, this is page 19 at the bottom of the statements, if anybody's looking there.
Page 46 of the top.
Oh, thank you.
Page 32, back to that.
But it's you see it in 2 spots. So he's looking at note 12, page 4.
If you look at
Note 12, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry.
This one is a little more detailed of the schedule. So you can see here, the allocations to date are in the restricted surplus. You can see the fluctuations for the year. Now, most of the stuff is fairly consistent. We did utilize a number of the reserves for the various projects throughout the year. So, but then that can be reallocated from the unrestricted this year, which I think is part of the discussion later today. I would just like to show everybody. So in your unrestricted pool or your amount to be delegated, if you so desire, there's absolutely no requirement. It is your choice. Is the 3.5 million this year. Now, if you're wondering, I always like to provide a little context of how that number gets there. Now, it's very, very straightforward. So it's 2 things. So essentially we have our $2.9 million in amortization, right? So that shows up as an expense on the income statement, but it's not actually cash out the door. So that expense essentially funds into that pool to be allocated because you collected or funded or budgeted around that expense, but it doesn't actually leave the county. It's still sitting in the bank, as well as the previously discussed gain loss on TCA. So a $440,000 loss on TCA is not actually you guys cutting a check for $440,000 to anybody. So if you take those 2 numbers and look at them together, that's roughly $3.3 million, and that's really close to our change year over year. So for the most part, it's those 2 non-cash items that go back into the pool to be distributed and allocated as you see fit. If anybody has any questions, again, there's no obligation or requirements of where you put that, how much you move in or out. That's just your pool to move as you wish. Anybody have any questions or?
Page 46, your clay levy operating,
So which one's right?
clay operating on page 46.
Well,
Note 12.
oh, yes, the operating levy, yeah.
So no change.
Unless you guys want to put money in that reserve, there was nothing in the budget and nothing moved to date. You're more than welcome to do it.
So you have to do that before the end of the year.
I think you were deciding to do that today, is my understanding.
We will be, later on today. But the, levy operator did not report for 2024, so that is something we're, trying to enforce it.
Okay.
And that's part of that special assessment thing that I'm working on as well, so
Okay.
he's getting letters from you. Okay,
Okay, so
oh yeah,
a little bit of clarification here, so
please.
I know it had me confused a little bit here until I talked to Rodney yesterday, but if you look at the page 32, your annual surplus shows up as 133,301.
Is this an older schedule? Sorry, I'm not the same page numbers as you.
no, it's page 5 of the financial statements.
Net financial assets? Okay.
You were showing our annual surplus is 133,301, right?
Yeah. Which is directly from the page before it, yeah.
Okay, so we gotta add depreciation back into that. Right?
No, this is net financial assets, so if you're curious to where this number ties to, if you look at the statement of financial position, the first page we walked through. This net financial assets is before capital, prepaids, and inventory. So that 21,889,932 is what we're trying to do on that schedule. Basically, it's your cash in and out, not your investment or your TCA, your gravel, all that kind of stuff.
So I guess what I just want council to be aware of is our surplus for the year is about 2.7 million, not 133,000.
From a cash standpoint.
From the
So,
capital perspective.
yeah, so if you're curious about the cash, go one page farther than you are now. If you go to the statement of cash flows, your cash surplus would be 3.42 million sitting there at the top. So essentially our annual surplus is 153,000. You factor out the two non-cash items, the ones I referenced in the reserve page, and there's your cash surplus of 3.4 million. Then we got some other changes throughout, but that's your operating cash surplus. And that very much directly ties to what I just mentioned in the unrestricted. Your unrestricted goes from 800,000 to 3.5 million because of that number right there. Any other questions and concerns about the statements before I just quickly go through the audit findings report? Okay, if anybody thinks of anything later, I'm happy to circle back. Okay, the audit findings letter. So this is the one we always kind of walk through. This is our summary of everything we've gone through in the year. So this would be outside of the financial statements. This is that second document. They get it? Okay, no problem. I'll just verbally walk you through it. You should have a draft prior to the approval at the next meeting. Okay, so we always like to kind of go through some of the bigger points of the audit itself. So this would be our internal controls. This is where we test purchasing controls, our revenue controls over utilities, taxes, making sure everything's going out to the residents. We test the sample, we verify the bylaws, we do all of that good stuff. We also test a significant amount of activity with payroll, whether it's making sure people are getting paid the right amounts, whether the payroll batches are being approved and paid on time, all that good stuff. And we found no significant deficiencies, everything looks strong. Accounting policies, we always like to go through any policies passed, any bylaws passed, and make sure they're both in compliance with the standards that we previously mentioned, as well as being adhered to by management. If you guys are passing stuff in this where we want to make sure that they're following it, and we're happy to report that we found no issues there, everything looks great. The other area we always like to disclose in the letter is throughout the financial statements, there's always going to be a few estimates Now these are required, but they are not a perfect science, of which you guys have three. So we have amortization of tangible capital assets. I mentioned this is a non-cash item. This is strictly us estimating based on guidelines and based on the approved rates. Essentially assets getting older and devalued. Now, everybody in this room knows that you can have a truck last 50 years, or you can have a truck that's 11 and last 5. At the end of the day, we're guessing, we're estimating, we're averaging. So we always like to disclose that. The other one is the asset retirement obligation. Again, we beat this to death last year. Gonna keep it fairly simple this year, but we're projecting, we're estimating based on engineering and public works reports, how much it's going to cost to clean something up way off in the future. So obviously a million things could change. Maybe you sell the land, maybe you don't even have to do it. At this point, it's just an estimate. We have to have something on the books to say that we can. And the last but not least is the allowance for doubtful accounts. As we mentioned, we are projecting based on historical patterns and basically clients that have ignored you guys. Maybe they come out of the woodwork tomorrow and they pay it in full and it should have been on there. At the end of the day, it's an estimate, a best guess estimate and an educated guess estimate, but an estimate nonetheless. So we always like to mention. And then we always like to go through any uncorrected misstatements. These are essentially errors or mistakes we found, but they're too small or not significant enough to impact your guys' decision making. So we don't bother adjusting it. And in this case, you guys don't have any. This management team and myself, anytime we find something small or large, we all agree that let's just fix it. So sometimes there's things that pop up in there, but we never, with you guys, we've all come to the agreement that we don't bother. We fix it. Everything that you see in here has been adjusted if we find it. And then last but not least is significant difficulties. Again, nothing to report here. The team is always accommodating, fantastic to work with. We show up in that conference room on the first day and Tracy brings up the paperwork and off we go for the full week and never any issues. Anybody, anytime you have questions or concerns, it's addressed instantly. So we appreciate that. That's the end of the letter, and that's the end of my presentation in a formal manner. So if anybody has any questions, concerns, anything they'd like to chat about, now's the time.
Council, any questions? Deputy Reeve?
I'm just looking at, the property taxes are 2.49 million. Government transfers 1.4. 43, page 43.
16.
Okay.
I think I'll when I come in, I'll have to sit down with Rodney and maybe he'll be able to explain some of this to me.
I think you're looking at the accounts receivable.
Yeah. On page 43, eh?
Anything you'd like me to clarify? I'm happy to do so.
No, you know what? I got lost here in the pages for a while here, eh? So that's fine.
Okay.
Excuse me. No, I'll be good for now. Thanks.
Any other questions? Yeah, I got a couple questions that are probably better addressed in a closed session. Sure. So if council doesn't have any more questions to the open session, I'd like to make a motion that Lamont County Council move the April 1st, 2025 regular council meeting into a closed session at 10:59 a.m. to discuss the following audit of 2024 financial statements. WIPAC section 24.1 A, C, and G. Any questions or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any?
Aye, go ahead.
Thank you. That's carried 5-0.
The recording has stopped. Immediate sensation.